Let's be honest, most men drift. We wake up, we scroll, we work, and then we just rinse and repeat. And we know we're softer than we should be. That's why I built the 31-day resilience reset. This is not a devotional. It is a field manual for men ready to stop drifting and start fighting back. So for 31 days, you'll train your spirit, mind, and body with scripture, prayer, and daily challenges that forge real resilience. Go to www.Undaunted.Life/31 days to download this resource for free. That's Undaunted.Life/31 days. Start your reset today. This is Undaunted Life, a man's podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Let's get into it. And even if our gospel is veiled to those who are perishing. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel, the glory of Christ, who's the image of God. Guys, that is 2 Corinthians 4, verses 3 and 4. Keep that in mind today. So thankful to have you today. So thankful to all of our donors as well, guys. If you're wondering how we can pull off this show, it's because we have donors, guys, just like you. We don't have like secret donors anywhere. It's guys giving $20 a month, $50 one time, $100 a month, whatever. Undaunted.life/donate, Undaunted.life/donate. Help us out. Keep all this moving along. And if you haven't left a review for this show, if you think we deserve 5 stars, go ahead and send it our way. 5 stars, share the show around. And some quick announcements. We have a new shirt and new hoodie in the shop. And I know it's like 1,000,000,000 degrees outside, but we just couldn't wait on this hoodie. It's our Christ is King hoodie. We have a t-shirt version as well. So go and check that out. Shop.Undaunted.Life. And again, I mentioned this a few weeks back, but we do have a new website. There's some kinks in the website here and there, and there's a little box there, I think in the bottom right. So if you see something that's wrong or something that's broken, a link that's broken or something that isn't quite working right, go ahead and send us that feedback. Now, today we are going to do some quick hitters. I know you guys love those, so we're going to hit these. The feminist governor of Massachusetts signing a bill that will allow babies to be murdered in the womb all the way up to the baby's delivery date. A father of a school shooter getting convicted for murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez posting a video explaining why she has decided to freeze her eggs and tells us all not to be weird about it. A Hollywood star claiming that people who think pit bulls are dangerous are participating in quote unquote dog racism. And you got to stick with us all the way to the very end because Nathan Apffel of the religion business proving once again he's not only a terrible journalist, but also an awful person. But before we get to the main thing for today, I just want to comment on this because I'm sure a lot of you thought I was going to comment on this. But last Friday, Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson got together for a moderated debate, and Patrick Bet-David was the moderator for this. So there was a lot of back and forth between Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson about if this was ever going to go down. Andrew Wilson mentioned it when he was on the Joe Rogan Experience. And then, after several $100,000s and all these public back and forth, it was finally going to happen. A few quick things. I'm not going to do a deep dive into this because it was essentially slop. But basically, they didn't do a great job of even advertising this because while it was happening, one of my guys, Matt, who's done the Fortune Table with us a bunch, he was like, hey, are y'all watching this debate? And I was like, oh my gosh, I guess the debate's happening right now. It was in the middle of the day on a Friday. And then you start watching the clips and then you get into the deeper content, back and forth. And here's the thing. What I thought it was going to be, it was, but worse. Ultimately, because Andrew Wilson is an incredibly skilled debater, but typically when he's doing debates, I'll say it this way. He's at his best when the person on the other side is doing their best, right? Because if the person's kind of obfuscating and kind of moving things around or only using straw men, it's just there's only so much you can do in that situation because they already look foolish. And so pointing at them and saying, you look foolish, it's only so effective. But when someone's actually steel manning your side and actually engaging with what you're doing, you can actually more effectively trap them. It's much more difficult as a debater to do that, but you can more effectively trap them whenever they're fully prepared and they actually have something to say. But Candace Owens apparently doesn't prepare anything and almost never has anything to say. And so essentially, I can save you the 3 hours. Patrick Bet-David, a lot of people are like, hey, he did a terrible job. I don't know what else he could have done. Honestly, other than to constantly interrupt them, especially when Candace would go on these long diatribes of, well, I think this, and I'm pretty sure this happened, and I have a source that says this, and blah, 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 blah. At some point, the moderator has to step in and say, time out, Candace. You just made 17 claims in a row, and so we need to look at these claims individually, and then you and Andrew can actually talk substantively about those specific things, but substance is not really Candace Owens' game. That's not really something she's very interested in, because her entire game, her entire shtick, her entire grift is, I have to throw so many things at you to where I overwhelm you with conjecture and her thought processes and things that she really feels and things that she doesn't really know, but she knows, because if you have so many things that you have to evaluate all at once, at some point you just give up. And then you just think to yourself, okay, maybe she's got a point. That's kind of where Joe Rogan is right now, because he mentioned publicly, he's like, yeah, I think Candace Owens has some good points. But then he can't elucidate which points specifically she has made, backed by evidence, that has made him think that way. It's just the absolute combination of overwhelming claims where somebody says them in such a cocksure way, and then you come away thinking, yeah, I think they really have a point here. And so part of it was just kind of gross with Candace Owens and Andrew Wilson trying to adjudicate things in public that is going to be adjudicated in a court of law, because you could tell why Andrew Wilson was there. He was there to make Candace Owens look foolish, but she looked foolish all on her own. Right? She had one gotcha where, she's like, what are the 7 charges against Tyler Robinson? And Andrew Wilson couldn't regurgitate the charges. Well, guess what? There are a lot of people that have paid attention to this case that don't have the charges memorized. And you know why people don't memorize things like that? It's because we don't really memorize anything at all. You know why? Because we have a supercomputer. We can just ask our phone to tell us something real quick, or we go to our favorite, AI chatbot, and we say, hey, what are the charges against Tyler Robinson? And in a nanosecond, you have the list right there. So a lot of Candace Owens people were really kind of like, oh, this is great. Look, Andrew Wilson wasn't fully prepared. Now, he should have known what the charges are. Like if he was going into a debate like that, like if I were going into that debate, I would certainly know what the charges are, because you can't really parse out, okay, is this charge worthwhile? Is there evidence to back this up? What does the public know versus what the prosecutors and what the defense know in this particular case? That was a gap in his, but it proved nothing in terms of Candace Owens' case, which is to insert tremendous amounts of doubt into the overwhelming likelihood that Tyler Robinson is the one that indeed killed Charlie Kirk, and he had no one else helping him. Because that's where all the evidence points for right now. That's what the prosecution argued in the preliminary hearings. And most of the stuff, actually everything that Candace Owens has posited, the defense is not using. And all the defense attorneys, Tyler Robinson's main 4 defense attorneys, they would use anything and everything to introduce doubt into the minds of the jurors, because that's their only job. The prosecution actually has the harder job, which is to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt that this person committed this particular crime. The defense just has to get one juror, to think, yeah, I don't really think so. This isn't beyond the reasonable doubt standard. So in a nutshell, should you go and watch this 3-hour debate? No. If you have 3 hours to kill, you can watch it on 3 different YouTube channels or whatever like that. And if you want to bump it up to 3 times speed and knock it out in an hour, I guess go for it. Knock your socks off. But the Candace Owens people went in thinking Candace Owens was right. They came out thinking Candace Owens is right. But then people with functioning brains, people that can look at logic, look at evidence, and surmise, guilt or innocence, or, hey, this is valid, this is invalid, this is likely, this is unlikely. You didn't come away being swayed off of your opinion at all. So Andrew Wilson people thought he won. Candace Owens people thought that she won. There's no one in the middle that's like, man, I don't really know. This Candace Owens gal, she sure seems to know what she's doing. No one really came away thinking that. So that's my, short synopsis of what went on there. So there you go. Hey guys, real quick. So I remember back in high school, I was training with these guys and they all got super jacked, but they were training and using these supplements that they were buying online, and a lot of them had crazy side effects. These were not good things. There's no telling what all was in these supplements. And so I've always kind of been scared about what supplements I'm going to put in my body. And I decided when I do start taking supplements, I want to make sure I'm using products that are certifiably clean and also using only high quality ingredients. And that's why I want to remind you guys that I have started taking and that we are partnered with Jocko Fuel. So Jocko Fuel is Jocko Willink's American-based supplement company. So what are they known for, and what are some of my favorite products that they make? They make a lot of whey protein powder. Their cookies and cream flavor is ridiculously good, especially with milk. And if you want to make some like peanut butter protein snack balls that a lot of people are making out there, that is a key ingredient. Also, they make the cleanest energy drinks that I've ever found, and my new favorite flavor is actually their latest flavor, which is Nitro Pop. Guys, it's incredible. They also have Jocko Hydrate drinks that are awesome because they are electrolyte drinks that aren't full of added sugar and artificial coloring and dyes and things like that. They also have the best tasting greens powder that I've ever had in my entire life. So you guys definitely have to check that out. But I also use their krill oil. I use their fish oil, creatine, vitamin D, magnesium, joint warfare, and their sleep aids. And they have new stuff coming out all the time. Guys, if you take your health and wellness seriously, then you simply cannot afford to put cheap and inconsistent and dirty supplements inside your body. Try Jocko Fuel out today by going to jockofuel.com. That's jockofuel.com. Use the promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. Again, that's jockofuel.com. Promo code Undaunted to get 10% off your order. All right. So if you've been following my solo episodes this year, you've kind of seen a little bit of a shift. We went away from quick hitters just for a little bit, not because they're not valuable, just because I had these big things that I was kind of thinking through and trying to figure out where I'm spending months at a time thinking about certain things. And then I'm trying to coalesce it all together into some sort of narrative that's helpful to you. And so episode 905, I did the Crisis of Discernment episode. And then you basically have a follow-up episode with Cluelessly Cocksure with episode 947. Then I did the Are You Carrying the Fire episode. That's where I looked at the movie and the book The Road by Cormac McCarthy, and that's episode 935, I think. And, kind of all the things that were in that. And then if I had a magnum opus, I guess it would be Alicia on the Dragon. As I said in that episode, if I die, like if I keel over today and it's like, hey, out of almost 1,000 episodes of this, like what's that one episode you want to leave for humanity? What's that episode when your boys are, able to reckon, that you really want them to reckon with? It's episode 941. But something that I've been thinking a lot about and that I'm going to be bringing to you today is this burgeoning red-green alliance. You probably heard about this, like doubtful that your pastors mentioned it, but maybe your favorite political commentators mentioned it, maybe someone on the news has mentioned it, maybe someone that you follow on social media, this red-green alliance. So what is the red, what is the green? Well, the red are communists, socialists, right, who are represented by that color, and the green are Muslims. And we see them as really odd bedfellows. So you have these like progressive communist folks, but then you have these fundamentalist Muslims. They seem to have disparate interests, but they seem to be getting into bed together, right? You look at someone like Zohran Mamdani or those types of individuals, and you're like, what exactly is going on here? But then also a few months ago, I saw this image. I don't know where it's from. I would love to give them credit, but it was this image of this four-headed serpent, right? And that image made me think of a Hydra. And so if you're familiar with like Greek mythology and things like that, the Hydra was that serpent that had multiple heads. I think, there were like 9, 10, 11 different heads. And the thing about the Hydra is, yes, it was a single animal with multiple heads, but also if you cut one of the heads off, it would just immediately grow back, right? So, think about that. It's one of the most terrifying things possible. Imagine actually trying to fight something like that. And ultimately what I was thinking through is, okay, how does all this relate to what's happening in our current culture? Because it feels like there are things that we think are dead that just come back with a vengeance, right? And so the ultimate point of the Leash on the Dragon episode was that God will use Satan, like a dog on a leash or a dragon on a leash, to do God's own will. And so even when things seem bad, ultimately we can still trust God. That was the ultimate point of that episode. No spoilers. But that really got me thinking about the different ways that Satan will attempt to lead image bearers of God astray in the end times. And we are living in the end times. I'm not claiming that, the world will end soon or that the rapture is going to happen soon. And some of you don't even believe in the rapture. Okay, that's fine. But we are clearly in the end times. Even in the first century, we are in the end times because Christ has not come back yet. I think we can all agree on that, right? So then what I was looking at, I was kind of combining the image of that four-headed snake, right? The four-headed dragon or serpent, this Hydra creature. And I quickly keyed in on four things. And I'd seen a lot of people kind of talk around the edges about these things, but I'm trying to bring them together into a narrative today. The four things that I think Satan is using right now more than anything else to get done what he wants to get done. The first is Islamic fundamentalism. The second is socialism/communism. The third is LGBTQ plus activism. And the fourth is globalism. So Islamic fundamentalism, socialism, communism, LGBTQ plus activism, and globalism. So on this episode today, we're going to look at those four things. And this isn't going to be exhaustive because, when I first started getting into the research, I was like, oh man, this episode is going to be like 4 hours long. So I needed to cut it back just a little bit. But I just want to give you enough information that will allow you to wrap your heads around this concept. And hopefully it gives you some appetite to go and look some more into this on your own. But then at the end, I'm going to give you some marching orders for the Christians, right? So for the Christians in the audience, there's going to be some marching orders for you. And so we'll just kind of go from there. So the first head of the Hydra is fundamentalist Islam, right? You could just say Islam writ large, but it's specifically fundamentalist Islam. So Islam in general, we need to do some definitional work on all these things. It's best defined by the Shahada, and the Shahada, or what the Muslims believe, is there's no God but God. They call God Allah, but there's no God but God, and Muhammad is the messenger of God, right? So another way to say is there's no God but Allah, and Muhammad is the messenger of Allah. So if you are a Muslim, you have to believe that. That is the very core definition of what you believe. But specifically, fundamentalist Islam, because everyone likes to say, Islamic extremism, like, those kinds of things. That's not really what they mean. They mean fundamentalist Islam. Because what fundamentalist Islam is a strict adherence to the least abrogated Quranic texts and hadiths. Okay? So some definitional work here. The Quran is, what they think was dictated via an angel to Muhammad in a cave. And okay, this was the revealed word of God. Now, the Quran is a mess. It's not in any particular kind of order. And then you got the hadiths. These are kind of descriptions of Muhammad's life and early Muslims, their lives, and there are other rules. And there's a lot of different hadiths. And depending upon which sect of Islam that you, subscribe to, there's going to be different hadiths that you feel like are, something that you should use in your life, ones that you trust, ones that you don't trust, whatever. But we're going to speak, just broadly about it. But whenever I say it's strict adherence to the least abrogated Quranic texts and hadiths, this is what I mean. Because the Quran has texts that Muhammad, if he were alive today, would say, yeah, I don't really mean that anymore. Abrogation means what I'm saying now is what I mean. What I've said in the past, I don't mean anymore. Okay? So when people will quote peaceful passages from the Quran written down by Muhammad, even though he was illiterate, things that were written down as if they were, given directly to him by an angel, and pretending like it's not a demon that did that, those peaceful passages were early passages. The least abrogated surahs, those are the chapters of the Quran, so think Surah 9, the least abrogated of all the surahs, those are the most violent, calling for the bloodshed of the infidels and those kinds of things. And so if you are a fundamentalist Muslim, obviously, you're going to listen to the last instructions that you got from your false prophet, not the earliest instructions, right? Because just imagine, this is that, hey, everybody, come in here like, we got this, 2-minute drill, or, we got the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter. We got to go down and score. We're throwing everything else out the window. So all the game planning that you did that week going in to this game, right? All that's out the window because we got to go score right now. So maybe you're real big on, pounding the ball between the guards. We're just going to run it up the gut, try to get 3-4 yards at a time. We're trying to wear down the defense, blah, blah. That doesn't apply anymore because we got 2 minutes left. We got to go score, okay? Think of that in terms of abrogation. It's like, yeah, everything that was said before, yeah, great, I meant it at the time, I don't mean it now. Now, in terms of where we are right now, there are about 2 billion with a B, Muslims on the planet right now. That's roughly 1/4 of the population of the earth. And this is how this is going down, like Muslim taking over, Islam taking over. Immigration, which leads to fake assimilation, which leads to takeover. Immigration, fake assimilation, takeover. So let's talk about immigration. So out of the around, 26 to 30 million total Muslims residing in Europe currently, and this includes, non-European Union countries like Switzerland and the UK and Norway, roughly 55 to 60% are first-generation immigrants. 55 to 60% are first-generation immigrants. The remainder consists of second and third-generation descendants. So these are, indigenous European Muslim populations you could think of. Now, in terms of fake assimilation, I have to go back to the Two Swords of Christ by Raymond Ibrahim. I've mentioned him a lot, but his work is incredibly, incredibly important. 3 books that you need to read in succession: Sword and Scimitar, Defenders of the West, The Two Swords of Christ. But his latest book, The Two Swords of Christ, he talks about something in chapter 12. And so if you go to his book, if you have the paper copy, it starts on page 86. But this is incredibly, incredibly important for you to understand. So I'm going to go ahead and read from the book, chapter 12, page 86 of The Two Swords of Christ. Unlike Christianity, which condemns all forms of deceit, a position which Christians then and now inadvertently project onto Muslims, Islam takes a rather lenient approach. Indeed, entire doctrines are dedicated to articulating the various ways Muslims may deceive others. Most of those teachings, however, tend to be conflated and placed under the umbrella term of Islam's most notorious doctrine of deception, taqiyya. Okay, so guys, just Takiya, you may have heard people pronounce it Takiya, but it's Takiya, Taqiyya, and it's this. Let believers, this is in the Quran 328, it declares, let believers not take for friends and allies infidels instead of believers. Infidels are non-Muslims. Whoever does this shall have no relationship left with Allah unless you but guard yourselves against them, taking precautions. And then if we look at Sheikh Al-Tabari, he's the author of kind of a standard and widely referenced Quran commentary. He offers this exegesis of 328. If you, Muslims, are under their, non-Muslims, authority, fearing for yourselves, have loyalty to them with your tongue, but behave loyally to them with your tongue while harboring inner animosity for them. Know that Allah has forbidden believers from being friendly or on intimate terms with the infidels rather than other believers, except when infidels are above them in authority. Should that be the case, let them act friendly towards them while preserving their religion. So the process of Takiya looks like it's looked for the entirety of Islamic history. You go into non-Islamic areas, you pretend to be nice. Maybe you pretend to be downtrodden, like you need some help. Oh, I'm just a weary sojourner. Please help me. The entire time realizing that you are just lying in wait until they, and I'm using this kind of broadly, until they turn their back, and then you can cut their throats or behead them, right? Lie in wait, pretend to be friendly, even pretend to assimilate, smile a lot, but then stand ready to kill the infidel. And then we get to the last part, which is takeover. And so how it looks initially, with in terms of what we see now, immigrate into other places, Takiya, pretend to assimilate, but then set up enclaves. Set up your own areas, create environments where the local magistrates, police forces, military, they're afraid to even go into, and keep pushing until you get what you want. And that's how it always eventually looks, and where it obviously eventually leads is conquest. Forced conversion. The history of Islam is not evangelism, it's conquest, okay? But also ways that they're doing this, that Muslims are doing this, is they're flat out outbreeding the rest of the world. That doesn't make me crazy for saying that. They say that, right? So Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world right now, in part because of forced conversion, because again, that's a feature of what they do, but in large part due to slowing birth rates in non-Muslim countries versus increased birth rates in Muslim countries. So in Muslim countries, the total fertility rate is somewhere between 2.3 and 2.8. So some Muslim countries are way off the charts, like Afghanistan is a 4.3 total fertility rate. Niger is a 6.1 total fertility rate. But then Western countries, they have a total fertility rate of 1.2 to 1.7. 1.2 to 1.7. Now, you may not know what any of that means. Like, hey, what's the big deal between 1.7 and 2.8? The translation is essentially all Muslim countries are above replacement rate, and they are shipping their people out to Western countries. And essentially no Western countries are above replacement rate, okay? And so replacement rate means that you have enough people that are aging, that are now out of the workforce, and you're creating enough younger people to support them as they die off and to keep the economy afloat. Basically, every Western country is below replacement rate, and basically every Muslim country is not only above replacement rate, but well above that. So, while the populations are declining in the West, they are taking in more Muslim immigrants because they feel like they have to. They feel like they have to because they have to keep their economy afloat. They need workers. They feel like they have to because they don't want to be called bad names. If they tell Muslims like, nope, you're not going to be coming here, right? They look at a country like Poland, which basically said absolutely not to all Muslim immigration and said, oh, those dirty, rotten, Islamophobic racists, we don't want to be like them. And so they keep taking in these hordes of people. Now, why Muslim fundamentalism is one of the heads of the Hydra is it is the largest and fastest growing false religion in the world, as we just talked about. But the central tenet of their religion is slaughtering the infidels. That's not like, some sort of obscure passage that some people abide by. That is a central tenet. So recently there was an imam, a Muslim scholar, and he's also like a Muslim apologist. I think it was in Indiana. He was doing a public speech or something like that. And you would recognize this guy's face from a lot of different debates that he's done with Christian apologists and things like that. And he basically said the highest honor for a Muslim is to die via jihad. It's to die while killing non-Muslims. So people talk about, oh, they're saying the quiet part out loud. It's like, yeah, if you've been paying attention, they've been saying it the entire time since the 7th century, right? And Islam is much, much more than just a religion. That's what some people don't really realize. Islam's not really a religion. It's more than that. It's an all-encompassing totalitarian worldview that controls people, controls governments, controls law, and is supposedly inextricably linked to the end times. So we can't just ignore it. So that's the first head of the Hydra, fundamentalist Islam. The second head is socialism and communism. Okay. Now, definitional work, people don't really know what those things mean. They kind of think so, but they don't know. So socialism, it's an economic and political system where the means of production, okay, are owned or controlled collectively. Okay. So that's typically by the state, some sort of workers cooperative, or just really the community as a whole. And so the means of production are owned by and controlled collectively rather than by private individuals or corporations. Okay. That's the easiest definition of socialism. Now, communism is a classless, stateless, moneyless society in which the means of production are owned in common by everyone, and goods are distributed according to the principle you probably heard this, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs. Okay? So you might even still be a little bit confused here. So simplification is great. Communism is where all socialist roads lead. Okay? And you've heard me say it a different way before. Socialism is just communism without balls and guns. Okay? That's all it is. Because it's these nice, oh, this is great. We're just going to give more. We're going to take from those dirty rich people that obviously just took advantage of people and stole. And we're just going to spread the wealth around. We're just going to spread the love, right? Until you get into actual communism and there's not a whole lot of love. But now we need to dig into some numbers. These should be rather sobering. But in the United States, Gallup did a poll back in 2025 last year. 39% of Americans hold a positive view of socialism. 39%. So that's largely been stable since 2010, but it was around 36%. Now it's 39%. So capitalism stands at 54% positive, which is down from 60% in 2021, right? So more favorable view of communism or socialism. Those things are going up, capitalism coming down. And among Democrats, positive views of socialism rose from 50% in 2010 to, get this, 66% in 2025. Socialism went from 50% positivity in 2010 to not that long later, 66%. Then the Cato Institute and YouGov did another poll back in 2025. 43% favorable views of socialism overall by our population. And among those aged 18 to 29, right, so that next big voting block, favorability reaches 62%. 62% with young people. And then communism registers 14% overall favorable and 34% among 18 to 29-year-olds. I'm going to repeat that. Communism overall, right? Because people, they don't really know what socialism is, so they're like, I like that. Communism, it's like, I don't know why I don't like that, but I shouldn't like that. So only 14% positive, favorable. 34% of young people see communism and they look at it favorably. And then Fox News did a poll so there was a record 38% of voters that say it would be a good thing for the United States to move towards socialism. 38%. That's up 32%. Up from 32% in 2022. Okay. In 2010, it was 18%. So in 16 years, it's gone up 20%. Okay. And the support is highest among young voters, Democrats, very liberal respondents, obviously. And then when it comes to youth presidential preferences, there were multiple surveys last year and this year, including Heartland, Rasmussen did one. They find that roughly 50% to 53% of voters aged 18 to 39, so expanding the demographic just a little bit, want a Democratic Socialist to win the 2028 presidential election. Over half of the voters aged 18 to 39, right, which is a huge chunk of this audience as well, want a Democratic Socialist to win the 2028 presidential election. So we're not really going to fully elucidate differences between socialism and democratic socialism because there are no differences. They just put the word democratic in front of socialist to make it seem better. But in terms of the organization, the Democratic Socialists of America, the DSA, their membership rose from about 6,000 people in 2015, so not very powerful at all, to over 90,000 people by last year. From 6,000 to 90,000 people in just a decade. And those are the people that are just card-carrying members of the DSA. That doesn't include all the people that support them. And so they're also, by now-ish, they're probably well over 120,000. Those are the estimates right now of where the DSA is. It's around 120,000. So we're at a 30,000, like a 33% growth just since last year. So it's the largest socialist organization in the United States history. Right? The largest one that we've ever seen. They've got some very prominent members. I've already mentioned Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City. You have Rashida Tlaib. She's a U.S. House of Representatives member. She's absolutely insane, but she's a member. You have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a United States House of Representative member. She says she's only a card-carrying member of the New York chapter, but you're a member of the DSA. And, the thing with her is, if you're not really familiar with AOC and the things that she's kind of looking at right now, like she's young, she's female, she's relatively attractive, she's dumb, she's dumb as a box of rocks. Like, her job before becoming a United States representative was a bartender. That's all she was able to do. And if you watch her talk for any length of time, you kind of realize how dumb she is. But she's just a dumber Bernie Sanders. She's young, female, attractive, dumber Bernie Sanders, right? So that's who she is, and that's how she's positioning herself. But right now, she's one of the leading candidates to run for president in the Democratic Party. In terms of where I am sitting, I think she 100% runs for president in 2028. In terms of representing the Democrats right now, if you look at some of the betting markets, Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom are number 1 and number 2. They're sitting around, like 18, 20% overall chance, like a 1 in 6 chance of being in there. But they're falling. Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris are, and AOC is rising. Right? And so the odds of her becoming president are probably better than 50%. I mean, I think, what was it? I think I misquoted it a second ago. AOC has about an 18% chance to represent the Democratic Party because Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom are at the top. So that's like a 1 in 6 chance to represent the Democratic Party, but we're so far out from the Democratic primaries leading into 2028. So I think that's going to shift considerably. But I would put the odds of her becoming president probably better than 50% right now. And also remember what I said earlier. Communism is just where all socialist roads lead, right? Socialism is just communism without balls and guns. So all of this burgeoning popularity for socialism is leading us somewhere, and that's communism. And so why this is one of the heads of the Hydra is because communism is one of the most, arguably the most oppressive system against Christianity ever, and really against theism in general. And this really goes into my next point here, which is communism and those ideologies is responsible. These totalitarian, non-theistic ideologies are responsible for tens of millions of deaths just in the 20th century. Tens of millions. But Satan, we'll talk about the effectiveness of Satan. He's convinced tens of millions of living people today that, communism just hasn't been done right yet. Tens of millions of people are dead, but we just haven't done it right yet. I think about it this way. I'm watching the Tom Hanks World War II documentary right now. It's like 20 episodes or whatever. It's spectacular. If you have any access to History Channel, you should go and check it out. But we have, this is something for all you Holocaust deniers out there. We have so much evidence, videos and pictures and eyewitness testimonies of the fact that the Holocaust actually happened. 6 million Jews were murdered. But do you remember seeing pictures of the Soviet gulags? Do you remember seeing, video reels from inside, the gulags where these people were put out in these different places in Siberia? They're freezing to death, starving to death, being tortured to death. We don't really have the images. So many more people died at the hands of the communists in the 20th century than died at the hands of the Nazi Party in Germany and the Third Reich, writ large over the rest of Europe. But we don't have the pictures. And so that's how you can have tens of millions of morons today that believe that, communism's not really that bad. It's just got a bad rap, right? Because the world thought, ultimately the world thought communism died when the USSR died. Like when the Soviet Union broke up, you're thinking like, oh shoot, this is done now. And yet here we are. Again, Hydra. You cut the head of the snake off of the serpent, you cut one of its heads off and it just grows right back. So you have fundamentalist Islam, you have socialism, communism. The third one is LGBTQ plus activism. Okay, so I hate saying this, but it's right, and it just boggles the mind. Roughly 1 in 4 people, Gen Z, young people, identify as LGBTQIA+. Some form of the growing acronym, 1 in 4. And so the parts of the acronym that don't seem to be changing are the L, the G, the B, the T, and the Q, okay? So L is lesbian, G is gay, B is bisexual, T is transgender, and Q is either queer or questioning, depending upon who you talk to. Now, why this is one of the heads of the Hydra is because it lacks, or actually more so, it attacks core doctrines of creation and morality. Core doctrines. So if you look at L, G, and B, lesbian, gay, and bisexual, first of all, it's against nature, right? You can't reproduce, you can't procreate. And then if we even look to scripture, we see this in Romans 1, verse 26, 27. For this reason, God gave them up to dishonorable passions, for their women exchanged natural relations for those that are contrary to nature. And the men likewise gave up natural relations with women and were consumed with passion for one another, men committing shameless acts with men and receiving in themselves the due penalty of their error. So it's completely disordered. Another reason, second reason, is all actions are under the umbrella of sexual immorality and abominable. Lesbian, gay, and bisexual actions are all under the umbrella of sexual immorality, and they are abominable. And so people love to say, well, Jesus never referred to homosexuality and never referred to gay marriage, any of those things. So, I'm not going to scream about what the Bible only whispers about, or I'm not going to scream about what the Bible doesn't even mention. Well, these people apparently don't know how words work, because if you go to Matthew 15, verses 19 and 20, these are the words of Jesus. For out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone. Let's go back to the word sexual immorality. That was a single Greek word, porneia, right? And that would mean any sex outside of the covenant marriage between one man and one woman for life. Any sex. So 2 dudes, yes. 2 women, yes. Someone that goes from a woman to a man to another woman to another man, whatever, those types of things. All of those things fall under the umbrella of sexual immorality. So obviously the L, the G, and the B are there. And then if we look in Leviticus, we see that it's described as abominable all the time. But now let's look at the T, transgenderism. So the number one scripture to refer to when someone talks about transgenderism, which actually means outside of gender, right? This idea that you are not fixed with, chromosomally, you're not fixed to your sex, but that there is a gender spectrum that you can be on. We need to look at Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. That was affirmed by Jesus in Matthew 19. Okay, so starting in verse 4, he answered, have you not read that he who created them from the beginning made them male and female, and said, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and the 2 shall become one flesh? So they are no longer 2, but one flesh. What therefore God has joined together, let not man separate. So that's the T. Then we need to look at queer questioning, right? So doctrinally speaking, the Bible establishes gender as, divinely ordered. It's a reality rather than something that is fluid and changing. We just went over that with Genesis 1:27. But then if we go to Psalm 139, it says that we are made fearfully and wonderfully, right? We're fearfully and wonderfully made. So we cannot change how we were made, right? We can change our appearance. We can even mutilate our bodies, cut our breasts off, cut our penises off. Like, we can do those things. We can inject things into our bodies that change the appearance of our body, but we cannot change how we are made, because that is ordered by God all the way down to our DNA and chromosomes. So we can't change that. We can change how we feel about it. We can change how we present to the world, but we can't change reality. And again, why this is one of the heads of the Hydra is, of all the heads of the Hydra that we're discussing today, and we got one more to go, it's the easiest to liken to the initial lie or initial question given to humanity. Did God really say? Did God really say? This is the dragon in the garden talking to Eve, and Adam's just sitting there like, duh. Did God really say? Did God really say that you as a woman can't have sex with another woman? I mean, did God really say that he would make you in this way and then tell you to not do things that could hurt you and destroy you? Did God really say that you're a little boy, but that you can't be a little girl? Did God really say that? These people that are 2,000 years later or several thousand years later looking at words and phrases in the Bible and being like, yeah, that's not really what it's meant. We've thought one thing doctrinally for thousands of years, but me, somebody that went to some random woke seminary who has the word theologian in their bio, say, no, those words actually don't mean what those words actually mean. Did God really say? So we have fundamentalist Islam. We have socialism, communism, we have LGBTQ plus activism, and the last head of the Hydra is globalism. This is one that a lot of people miss. So globalism is essentially the belief that countries should work together and be interconnected. Okay? This is economically, politically, culturally, they just all should be connected rather than operating in isolation. Okay? So that's how it's defined, and it sounds really nice. Oh, global community, like we're all just going to make sure like, oh, you're a little bit better at this, so you'll do that, and we're a little bit better at this, so we'll do this. That's how it's defined, but here's how it works in reality. If you are a globalist in your ideology and in your actions, overall, you're weakening national sovereignty, clearly. You're weakening borders, rule of law, local industry, cultural identity. That's all part of the game. And also, it's so ridiculous, but you're completely ignoring the reality that nations have different interests. One of the things that has led to a lot of America's issues and problems internationally when it comes to like international relations and international geopolitics and all those types of things is we assume other countries share our same values and they want what we want. That's what we're seeing right now with really the debacle that the Trump administration is operating right now in terms of the war with Iran. You can't negotiate people that have an existential goal to eradicate you. You can't do that. I said that all the way back whenever, Hamas went into Israel and killed over 1,000 innocent people, and then the war started and Israel came in to try to eradicate Hamas. People are like, why can't they just negotiate? Why can't they just use diplomacy? It's because Hamas existentially wants every single Jew on earth to die. That's why. I can't negotiate in good faith with somebody that only wants me dead, right? Imagine me going to my neighbor who I know wants me dead, who's tried to kill me before, and we just sit down with some neutral third party, even though there's no such thing, but we sit down with this neutral third party and we try to negotiate the terms of us being neighbors. Can I ever trust that person to honor what is written in that agreement, even if they sign it? Of course not. I would be a fool to think so. And here's the thing, getting back to globalism, we've already seen this play out. We have already seen this play out. So Genesis 11, starting in verse 4, or I think it may be verse 1. Anyway, Genesis 11. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, behold, they are one people. They have all one language, and this is only the beginning of what they will do. And nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language so that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth. And from there the Lord dispersed them all over the face of all the earth. So we see an example there, thousands and thousands of years ago, of what happens when there is concentrated, unaccountable political power. What we see with the story of the Tower of Babel, again, it's this big in Scripture. It's not very big. But when you think, when you start peeling back the onions of importance of that kind of a story, it's describing concentrated, unaccountable political power on a global scale. And if we look at really the entire narrative of Scripture, nations and national identity are a feature of God's plan. It's not a bug, it's a feature. So the Tower of Babel, because of that, God scatters the builders himself. Right? It's not some sort of like sinful, evil man or cabal or group of people that does it. God himself scatters these people, these builders all over the earth. Okay? This was part of his plan. Then if we go to Acts 17, verse 26, this is Paul addressing the Areopagus in Athens. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. This is Paul describing national boundaries. And he's framing it accurately as providential. It's not merely a political reality based on, two warring factions negotiating with one another. These are national boundaries that are providential and from God. Then if we go to Deuteronomy 32, verse 8, when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God. Okay? So borders, national sovereignty, national interests, right? Nationalism, right? We'll do a future episode on Christian nationalism and how that's, gotten this ridiculous negative connotation to it. That's all providential, okay? Why is globalism one of the main heads of the Hydra, one of the four heads of this Hydra? Is humanity, and we've seen this. This isn't just a Tower of Babel problem and a modern problem. It's been all throughout human history. It tends towards hegemonic cooperation because it makes things easier and cleaner, right? That's how it seems. But it's always a disaster. Always. Again, I'm neck deep in World War II stuff right now. So when you look at, the powers of, you have Germany and Japan and Italy coming together. They all had disparate interests. It kind of looked like they aligned, but not really. And it was a disaster for them. Thank God for the world. But then even when you look at the United States, when you look at the UK, when you look at Canada, when you look at France, when you look at all these different groups that were getting together, they had different interests. Even within the framework, right? FDR had a different interest than General MacArthur, who saw things very differently than the Supreme Commander, Dwight Eisenhower. They all had different interests, even within the same hegemon, right? And, humanity tends towards that because it seems cleaner, it's easier to understand, but it's always disastrous. And then there are supranational, so not supernatural, but supranational governing bodies. They always move away from God and His Word, right? They never move towards it. They always move away from it. And, when we look at it in a modern sense, they always tend towards pro-abortion, pro-LGBTQ, anti-free speech, and so on and so forth. And the interesting thing about this gets back to the idea of the Red-Green Alliance. All those four heads of the Hydra, which again are fundamentalist Islam, socialism, communism, LGBTQ plus activism, and globalism, they're all coming together and have come together under one banner: the Democratic Party in the United States. And you might think like, oh man, that's a pot shot going after the Democratic Party and the DNC in that way. Can you prove me wrong? Because I described four of the biggest voting blocs and the most dominant powers and forces currently inside the Democratic Party in America. Party leadership, right? Hakeem Jeffries, and other like Democrats that are trying to control the House and the Senate, Chuck Schumer. They're sitting there like, how in the world are we going to deal with these socialist candidates that have glommed onto our party, right? And how they're choosing to deal with it is to is certainly to not say anything negative. It's to try to be neutral and silent, or to just outright say, nope, we support them. What are they doing when they have, because you've even seen this, you see these Muslim imams come out and say, well, yeah, of course we're going to try to take over the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party, because the Republican Party is going to actually push back on us. The Democrat Party, they're trying to, we're trying to be big tent. Come on in. Water's fine. Oh, you want to actually kill all of us and behead us and take over the entire country? We don't believe you. You seem nice, right? The foolishness of the Democratic Party has allowed the four heads of the Hydra inside that tent. And here's the whole thing. It's taken a while to get here. The enforcement mechanism for the four-headed Hydra is incredibly simple. They just use fear. That's how they enforce their ideology, and that's how they keep you from speaking up. They use fear, but maybe not in the way that you're thinking, right? It's not threats necessarily. It's name calling. Because supposed political moderates, which again, that's not a thing. Political moderates, centrists are just people that haven't fully thought through the issues. But then when you look at conservatives, the Christian right, like however you want to couch it, so many of those people are terrified of being called a name. You push back on fundamentalist Islam. Hey, stop it, Islamophobe. If you push back against LGBTQ plus activism, hey, stop being such a homophobe. Hey, why are you such a transphobe, bro? And then there's the ultimate catch-all that really captures all the heads of the Hydra. It captures fundamentalist Islam, it captures socialism, communism, it captures LGBTQ plus activism, and it captures globalism. You racist. Oh, you don't want to just open the doors to all the Muslim immigrants from the Muslim third world? Racist. Oh, you think that there should be just standards for people getting into college, or standards for pilots, or standards for people that get jobs. We should give no regard to race or gender, things like that. Racist. People that will push back against killing babies in the womb. We'll talk more about that here in a second. Racist. Pointing out statistics in terms of crimes in America and who they're committed by, the level of melanin of the people committing these crimes, the level of melanin of people that are killing their babies while in the womb. Don't point that out. Racist. It's the ultimate catch-all. And we are terrified of being called a name. Terrified. But allow me to just put a little bit of lead in your pencil, guys. If someone calls you one of those names, racist, transphobe, homophobe, Islamophobe, this should be your reaction. So? Why would you think that I would care what you think I am? Because they can't see inside your brain. They can't see inside your soul. They can only evaluate your actions. And most of these people don't have a functioning prefrontal cortex. So if they call you Islamophobe, homophobe, transphobe, racist, this is a moron calling you a name. Why are you dignifying that with a response? Guys, why do you think I almost never go in my comment section on YouTube or Instagram, all those types of things? Because it's a bunch of dum-dums in there, right? Oh, you don't like that. Oh, you're just racist. Oh, you just got another $7,000 from Bibi Netanyahu, didn't you? Like that kind of thing. Why in the world would I engage with that? Especially since a lot of those people are bots. Iranian bots, North Korean bots, Chinese bots, Russian bots. Why in the world am I going to get in a fight with a robot, right? We haven't gotten to the Terminator scale yet where I'm actually going to have to fight a robot. But why am I getting a verbal fight on social media with a dang robot? Why in the world would I do that? But for all of you that are so terrified of being called a name, just respond with a question. Oh, you racist. Why would you think I would care what you think? You're not a consequential person to my life, and yet you called me this horrible name with no basis. Why in the world would you think I would care? That is way more effective than, I'm not a homophobe. I have a gay uncle, right? I got a couple of buddies on Facebook that they're gay. They kiss each other. They're dudes, right? I'm not racist. I got black friends, right? I can call one right now. You want to FaceTime my black friend? Look how stupid you look. Someone calls you one of those names, you respond with, why would you think that I would care what you think? Who are you to say that to me? But here's the thing about the four heads of the Hydra. These groups might seem like really strange bedfellows. And the reason they seem that way is because they are. Now, this is going to take a while. I'm going to try to go through it as quickly as possible, but we do want to be somewhat exhaustive on the things that matter. There are a lot of contradictions between these four groups, okay? So buckle up. There's a lot here, but really just kind of dive in. If you need to pause, take a break, go get a drink, go to the bathroom, fine, come on back. So let's look at some of the contradictions between fundamentalist Islam and socialism, communism. So we have God versus materialism. So classical Marxism interprets religion largely through an economic and class relations, whereas Islamism treats revelation as the ultimate truth, right? The Shahada is ultimate truth. Also, religious authority. Islamists elevate religious law and scholarship, right? Sharia law, those things. Communist movements historically attempt to eliminate independent religious authority. They want to get rid of God in all forms. Then you have Sharia versus revolutionary law. So one seeks law derived from the Quran and the Hadith, and the other derives law from class struggle, revolutionary authority, those things, revolutionary authority. Then you have private property. Islam generally recognizes private property, trade, inheritance, subject to religious limitations, of course. Communism seeks collective ownership of productive property, right? They want everyone to be equally poor, essentially. And then if we look at inheritance, Islamic jurisprudence prescribes defined inheritance shares, right? This is a defined thing. Whereas communists have often sought to restrict or abolish large inherited property. They want it to go back to the state. Then you have markets. Islamists may accept private businesses and markets, fairly open market. Communists oppose capitalist ownership. The social unit. Islamism emphasizes the religious community, like the Ummah, while Marxism emphasizes economic class. They try to destroy religious community in general, even families in general. Primary conflict. Islamists may understand history as, a moral and religious struggle towards the end times, the eschaton, whereas Marxists frame it principally as a class struggle. That's all this is down here. We're just, chimps struggling. Then you have nationalism. Communists seek state or communal ownership. Islamists may seek only religious regulation of otherwise private economic activity, right? Then if we look at revolutionary destination, An Islamic state or moral society is not the Marxist, classless, and ultimately stateless society. That's not how Islamism derives where they're going. Now let's look at the contradictions between fundamentalist Islam and LGBTQ plus activism. This is one of the most stark ones. So where do we get our source of morality? Muslims believe in divine revelation and, religious jurisprudence versus, LGBTQ plus people, which is individual autonomy and secular equality, whatever that means. Then you have same-sex relationships. Islam strictly prohibits this. LGBTQ plus movements, they seek its complete legal and societal and social equality. Then obviously an extrapolation of that is marriage. Muslims, they have traditional heterosexual marriage versus the other side, which is legal recognition of all kinds of marriage setups, right? All kinds of different types, 2 men, 2 women, a bunch of different people, polyamory, that kind of stuff. Then we have gender. Muslims believe that, male and female categories are fixed and prescribes roles versus the recognition of transgender or non-binary or gender non-conforming identities. If we look at family structure, Islam's very patriarchal, it's complementary sex family models versus the other side, which is every possible family structure under the sun, whether or not it's positive, especially for children. And then we have laws, purpose. What's the purpose of law? So we have the enforcement of public morality, that's Islam, versus the other side, which is protection of private consensual choice. Okay? This idea that if I choose it, it becomes moral. But now what about fundamentalist Islam and globalism? Let's talk about sovereignty. We have divine sovereignty with Islam and religious laws, versus globalism, which is treaties, international courts, multilateral rules. Then we have universal human rights. So liberal globalism applies one rights framework onto the top of every society, whereas Islamists, they insist that rights be interpreted through Sharia law. That's the only overarching connection. Then we look at religious pluralism. So liberal systems, generally require equal citizenship regardless of belief, whereas Islam has no room for infidels whatsoever. There's no such thing as pluralism in a Muslim society. Then we have freedom of religion. So liberalism, globalism includes the right to change or reject religion outright. That's apostasy, which means death in terms of Islam. Then with speech, liberal globalism generally protects criticism of religion. But then fundamentalists have blasphemy restrictions, blasphemy laws. You can be killed for that. And then if we look at national and religious identity, international governance may appear to dilute the religious identity or independence of an Islamic state. They can't have that. Foreign intervention. Globalists may endorse sanctions or humanitarian intervention. But Islamists, they may view these as just Western domination, right? Don't pay attention to Islamic conquest, but we got to keep that Western domination out of here. And then the last one is assimilation. So we have global integration. That assumes some common civic rules. But then fundamentalism on the Islamic side resists assimilation. Okay? Now let's switch to socialism and communism versus LGBTQ plus activism. There's quite a few here as well. Class versus identity. So orthodox Marxists regard class as the central political division. But LGBTQ activists treat sexuality and gender as independent sources of oppression, right? They're independent from all the others. Then we have universalism versus, particular identities. So communists emphasize a universal working class. Identity politics, those movements organize around particular lived experiences. Oh, this is my lived experience, right? It's standpoint epistemology. Then we have redistribution versus recognition. So socialists prioritize wages, ownership and public services, whereas LGBTQ organizations prioritize cultural and legal recognition. That's their highest priority. Then we have independent civil society. So authoritarian communist systems subordinate independent organizations to the party, but LGBTQ movements require autonomous advocacy. Then we have personal freedom versus state planning. So obviously LGBTQ liberation emphasizes private autonomy. I want to do this. Why? Because I want to do this. Then authoritarian, communist or socialist systems, they can give the state extensive control over personal lives. You are not your own. You don't get to make your own decisions. And then the last one here is, speech and organizing. So LGBTQ activists require the ability to criticize governments. They have to. But if you're authoritarian communist parties, they historically restrict dissent, right? Murderously so. Now let's look at socialism, communism versus globalism. Now in terms of ownership, socialists and communists want everything owned publicly, but globalists still believe in private property, still pretty capitalist for the most part. Now, in terms of company structure, socialists and communists want organized labor controlled by the state, whereas globalists want multinational corporations that are kind of controlled locally. In terms of capital investment, socialists and communists want worker control of the investment, whereas globalists want free movement of capital and not controlled by a bunch of random slappies, by the people that are actually in control and can make those decisions. In terms of financing, socialists and communists want public banking, where globalists prefer private financing. In terms of intellectual property, IP, socialists and communists want social ownership of knowledge. So if you come up with the idea, you don't own it, everyone does. Whereas globalists want intellectual property protections. That's the only way that you can really profit off of it. In terms of taxation, socialists and communists want international redistribution of wealth, and they can only do that via confiscation through taxation. Whereas globalists would prefer a lower corporate tax rate so that companies can continue to invest, grow their workforces, kind of grow their companies overall, their overall value. Then we have socialists and communists that want local economic planning and control, whereas globalists want kind of a global supply chain and control. And then in terms of politics, socialists and communists want a one-party government, obviously, where globalists prefer political pluralism, or at least the idea of political agnosticism. So that's the differences there. Now let's look at LGBTQ activism and globalism. Guys, I know this is a lot, but if you need to go back later, obviously you should review this material again. I want you to have these arguments and thoughts in your head. Now LGBTQ activism and globalism. In terms of identity, most LGBTQ plus activists come from a Western perspective, right? It's not really something you get from the third world or from the East. Whereas a globalist has to consider perspectives that will map easily onto all cultures. So it's kind of this generic ideology. Globalists need free migration of labor, right? But there are countries all over the world that balk at LGBTQ plus identity. They're like, yeah, you're not going to do that crap here. Get out of here. And then in terms of corporate sponsorship, globalists want to support entities that will aid business, right? It's all about bringing that top dollar up. They don't really want ones that are just going to yell and complain to HR constantly. That's not really what they want. But now we need to look at them all four together, all four hydras, the four-way contradictions between fundamentalist Islam, socialism, communism, LGBTQ activism, and globalism. Here's one. Who has the final say and authority? Like, to what authority do we appeal? Muslims would say Allah or their false prophet Muhammad. Socialists and communists will say, either the party or the working class. LGBTQ activists say the individual and whatever they feel at the moment. Whereas globalists would say international institutions and what's best for them. Also, four-way contradictions. What's the ideal economy? Muslims say one that's religiously regulated in terms of the private markets. Socialists and communists say state ownership. LGBTQ activists say just personal ownership, right? They don't really want a huge stake in everything else. And globalists would say global capitalism, right? Bringing that top dollar up and value up as much as possible. And then what about morality? Which is very important to any society and culture. Muslims say that morality is fixed and determined by a law that was, given to Allah in a cave. Socialists and communists say that morality is determined by the state, determined by the party in power. LGBTQ activists say that morality is fungible and individually determined. And then globalists say that morality is just whatever leads to more flourishing across the globe, when they actually just mean financially. But also, how do we organize society? Like Muslims would say that we organize society around the dictates of Muhammad, the false prophet. Socialists and communists say that we organize a society around whatever the party in control deems. LGBTQ activists organize society where they are at the top of every institution and all of culture, right? And globalists say that society should be flattened to be more globalist in perspective. Now, what about national sovereignty? Muslims believe that every nation should be a Muslim nation, and if they could actively do so by the sword right now, they would. Communists and socialists believed in strict national sovereignty. Otherwise, party control doesn't really make sense if you can't even control your borders. Then you have LGBTQ activists. They share the exact same points of view as most progressives, which is to say they think borders in and of themselves are racist and unnecessary. And then globalists don't believe in national sovereignty because they want a global hegemony. We don't want you to have your own identity, ultimately. I know that's a lot. We spent a lot of time getting into all these different areas. Again, I said this isn't exhaustive. This could have been a lot longer. So yes, there are a great deal of contradictions between these rival groups amongst all of them together. But one thing that all these groups have in common, currently under the DNC banner, the four heads of the Hydra, the thing they have in common is their enemy. Their enemy isn't, Republicans, conservative folk. It's God. God. Yahweh. The God of the Bible. Muslim fundamentalists, socialists and communists, LGBTQ plus activists, and globalists all have a common hatred, and that's God. And God just so happens to be Satan's existential enemy as well. Why do you think he's so creative and effective at getting people to buy, to allow in the four-headed Hydra into their brain, into their party, into their tent, right? He's so good at this, Satan is. Because ultimately this is a battle of authority, is it not? And the Christian God shares authority with no one and no group, right? I mean, Romans 13, he allows for local control of magistrates. You go back to the time of the judges. You go back to the times of the kings of Israel. Like, God is not sharing his power in the way that we think of sharing, because he is ultimately sovereign and ultimately in complete control. He does not abdicate leadership in any particular category whatsoever. And then, obviously, in the Christian worldview, in reality, God is revealed through Jesus Christ, right? But a worldview centered on Jesus Christ is anathema to fundamentalist Islam, socialism, communism, LGBTQ activism, and globalism. The dictates of Jesus and biblical morality are anathema to the four heads of the Hydra. And again, remember the name of today's episode in terms of it being a Hydra, two main qualities of a Hydra. It's a creature with multiple heads, and if you cut one of the heads off, it grows right back. Look at Islam. If you go look at what happened during the Crusades and the fights to push Islam back out of Europe, right? It was initially a defensive battle for Christians in Europe. Like, the Hydra grew back. You kill all these Muslims. Look at all the modern wars in the Middle East, right? Even including the Soviet Union going into Afghanistan, us going into Afghanistan, Iraq, what we've been doing in Syria, now in Iran. No matter what happens, the ideology comes back. It doesn't matter how many terrorists you kill. Socialism and communism, right? Guys, if you were called a socialist or a communist back in the day, that would be a label of shame. Like, you'd be ready to fight. Oh, you called me a communist? You ready to go, bro? Like, that was kind of what would happen. But in our modern culture, it's not. It's not a derisive term. That's a huge problem, right? Tens of millions of people are pro-socialism and communism now. The head of the Hydra just grows right back. Let's look at LGBTQ plus activism. Remember how conservatives and Christians felt after Trump was reelected in 2024? Like, I remember all the people doing the eulogies for wokeism and LGBTQ plus stuff, all the trans stuff, like transing the kids. They were writing the eulogies. I remember talking to conservative Christian podcasters that just weren't that motivated anymore to do the work that they had been doing, saying the things that they had been saying, because they're like, yeah, woke is dead, all this is dead. I'm like, bro, it's down. It's not dead, right? It's Tyson Fury on the mat, right? He's up before the 10 count. He's knocked out, but he's back. Like, you thought you knocked him out, but you didn't kill him. He was just on the ropes, as it were, right? And again, it's like you cut the head off and they just come right back. And now look at us marching into the midterms. Christians and conservatives are freaking out because of what it looks like. The Democrats are taking over the House. It's happening. Guys, wrap your minds around it. They got a good shot at taking over the Senate as well. Right? Remember me back in the day talking about James Tallarico even before the Democratic primary against Jasmine Crockett? Me telling you, like, yeah, this guy could win. And then after he beat her, I'm like, yeah, not only does he have a great shot of being a senator in the state of Texas, he has a great shot of immediately running for president and winning, doing the Barack Obama playbook. People are like, oh, no, that's crazy. That's crazy. Does it look crazy now? Check the polls. Does it look crazy now? Look at globalism. Remember in 2020? People finally woke up to the importance of national sovereignty, localized production of goods, questioning of the government narrative, those types of things. Guys, I'm telling you, if another pandemic happens this week, a bunch of you are going to go out and get your masks and you're going to put them on. A bunch of you are going to do whatever the local magistrates tell you to do, which would include shutting down your kids' school, destroying their educational production and progression. Right? You're going to do whatever they tell you to do. You're going to do whatever the local magistrates tell you to do. And guess what? In a more globalist society, you're going to do whatever the people that are in charge, wherever they're in charge, even if it's nowhere near you, you're going to do exactly what they say. The head of the Hydra came right back. So with all this information, What are Christians to do? What are we to do with all this? The first and maybe one of the most important is to educate your kids yourself. Now, what I'm not saying is you must homeschool your kids or you're the worst person ever. If you choose homeschool, that's great. If you do, private Christian, vetted private Christian school, great. If you want to do some sort of alternative education, classical education, things like that, all that, if God forbid you put your kids in public school, you've got to educate your kids. Because we talked a little bit about the Holocaust in my K through 12 education in Oklahoma public schools. Enough to where I knew that Hitler and the Nazis were the bad guys, unlike these modern day, people that are, Tucker Carlson's favorite historian that's like, actually, it was the Axis powers weren't that bad. It was Winston Churchill. He was the bad guy. FDR was the bad guy, right? Somehow. Educate your kids yourself. I never heard the phrase gulag or the word gulag as a kid. Gulag Archipelago. Didn't know what that was. Had no idea who Alexander Solzhenitsyn was until I was an adult. The horrors of the Soviet Union and communism is something that I had to be taught. And you're going to get that basically in no private K through 12 education. And, they'll never do it in a normal state school, collegiate education, right? So Christians, you should educate your kids yourself in age-appropriate ways to help them understand the evils of the four ideologies that I've just elucidated. Also, Christians, if you're just a normal citizen, right? You're just working a job, you're living in a decent neighborhood with an HOA. If you're a normal citizen, say no and then stand by it. When somebody wants to do something in your area in one of these four heads of the Hydra ways that push against the morality of God, say no. Say no. And get others that agree with you to also say no. Say it with your chest and then stand by it. And then when the local news, which is all left-leaning, even if you're in a red area, including Oklahoma, when they call you one of those names, when people you went to high school with leave a nasty comment on your Facebook, when you get a text from someone that disagrees with you and they call you one of those names that caused you to feel fearful, stand your ground. Say no and stand by it. And attached to that, let's say you're not just a normal citizen. Let's say you're in a civic position of power, authority, of some kind. Say no and stand by it. Say no and stand by it. So I was actually just given an amazing gift by a buddy of mine that I trained jiu-jitsu with. He's a police officer with the Edmond PD, and he told me this story about the old Edmond PD patch that is worn on the uniform. Okay, so if you were walking around Edmond, Oklahoma in the early 90s, you saw a police officer, you would actually see this patch. He actually gave me this patch. So actually, Landon, let's go ahead and put that up on the screen. Let's go ahead and put that up on the screen. That's the old patch, and we'll just leave it up there as I describe this. Okay, so if you look at the patch, there's two hands shaking in the middle. That's pretty easy to surmise what that is. On the left side, there's a building that's called Old North, right? So that's it's a landmark on the University of Central Oklahoma campus. That's where I'm an alumni of. So is my wife. That tower was built in 1892. It was the first building built on what was then called Oklahoma Territorial Normal School. So that is the highest building. It's actually a city ordinance. No building can be built higher than Old North. That's why you won't see anything higher than 4 stories in Edmond. On the top, there's a picture of a steam train. So this area was part of the unassigned lands back in the day when the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railways built a stop here for coal and water before it was even founded as Edmond, Oklahoma. On the bottom is the year 1889, which is the year Edmond, Oklahoma was founded. It was named after Edmund Burdick. He was a Santa Fe railroad traveling freight agent. And then on the right, you'll see a cross, okay? Everybody kind of knows what the cross is. It's symbolizing what Jesus was crucified on, and it's a symbol of Christian victory, which is victory that we get in Christ when we're imputed with his righteousness, okay? But then around 1993, there was a guy that didn't even live in this community. He saw that patch. He saw the cross on it, and he got his feelings hurt. His tummy started to ache, and he filed a lawsuit. Again, not even a member of this community, filed a lawsuit claiming a violation of church and state. And to their chagrin and to their shame, The Edmond Police Department and the city leaders of Edmond at the time were apparently too cowardly to push back against this frivolous lawsuit, which is what it was, and they caved. They caved immediately. And so look at what the patch looks like now. Let's throw that up there, Landon. This is what the patch looks like now. So everything looks the same as before, but the cross is missing. Looks the same as the before, but now the cross is just gone. What the city leaders in the Edmond Police Department should have done is they should have fought the lawsuit and basically told this big doofus to go pound sand. We're not taking the cross off of this. And this was at the time when we weren't even a post-Christian America. This was in the 90s, right? Where even if you weren't a Christian, you would pretend to be one because it would pay dividends for you. But the local magistrates caved. If there had been a vote in the community, it would have overwhelmingly been voted to approve to keep the cross on this patch. And now it's just a remnant of history in terms of my city. Another thing that Christians should do in light of the four-headed Hydra is, for the love of God, would you just vote? Would you vote? I've been around people my entire life that complain. They lament. Gosh, they get fired up watching Sean Hannity or stuff they see on their Facebook algorithm, and they've never gotten their lazy butts in their vehicle and driven to a polling place and voted even in a local election. Certainly never voted in a general election, and yet they want to lament where society is going. It's going to hell in a handbasket. Well, you know you have a role to play in that, right? You know people have literally died so that you could have the right to vote in a constitutional republic, to have leaders that would represent you. And my God, it's not a perfect system, but it's better than every other system that's ever been tried in the history of planet Earth. But you don't want to vote. Too hard to stay up on the issues. Too inconvenient. Might have to use some vacation time to go vote because your workplace doesn't really care about whether or not you vote or not. And then when these things happen, when parts of the Hydra get pushed into your neighborhood, into your front yard, into your lap, you love to lament. You love to complain. You love to put out angry Facebook messages, but you don't even vote. Help me. But also, there's a lot of persecution with the four-headed Hydra, and we should pray for those who persecute us. Jesus, Matthew 5, starting in verse 43, you have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Pray for them. Muslims that want to kill you, socialists and communists that want to take everything from you that you earned and give it to everybody else that's earned nothing. LGBTQ plus activists that think you're the worst person ever because you disagree with what they think. Globalists that just want you to be part of their hegemon, that they get to define everything, including morality. They're persecuting you, and you should pray for them. Which leads to the last thing here as we wrap, evangelism. Evangelize these people. This is Jesus again in Matthew 28, starting in verse 19. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. This is ultimately an evangelism problem. Because guess what, guys? You might have your head chopped off by a Muslim someday. You might be under the boot of a communist regime that takes you away from your family and throws you in a gulag until you die. You might have an LGBTQ plus activist that is in charge of HR in the company you work, and because you don't agree with the way they do things, you're going to lose your job. You could be on the receiving end of a globalist identity that is thrust upon you, your morality, and your family, and your way of life. All those things could happen. And if you are in Adam, you have no hope. Ultimately, regardless of your circumstances, whether you're in the land of milk and honey or you're in the darkest part of the valley of the shadow of death, if you are in Adam, you have nothing to be hopeful about. Nothing. But if you are in Christ, you're a new creation. And your salvation, when it was imputed to you, wasn't just a past tense thing. That's your justification. It's a present tense thing because you are being sanctified, but it's also a future tense thing because you will eventually be glorified. But you won't be any of those things, justified, sanctified, or glorified, if you keep your faith in yourself. It's not possible. Because when you keep your faith in yourself, at best, you're doing white-knuckled, determined morality and behavior. And we see from the authoritative scripture word of God that you can't do enough good things or behave good enough to be perfectly righteous. Only Jesus was able to do that, and they killed him for it. But it was part of God's plan because he had a leash on the dragon. He sent his son to this earth to pay a sin debt that we could not pay, but still owed. He was placed into a tomb, and he rose from it 3 days later. And that resurrection is a symbol of the new life that you can have if you are in Christ. What you must do is you must transfer your faith from yourself and onto the finished work of Christ at the cross. That's what you are to do. And if you already believe that, you got to share with some other people. That's what we're called to do. Evangelism is the key. And behold, he will be with us always to the end of the age. Hey guys, real quick, I just wanted to remind you that we have an official Undaunted Life store. You can go to shop.undaunted.life or check it out in the show notes. Guys, we're always going to have hats and shirts and a bunch of other awesome stuff. Go there, support us, wear the mission. Again, it's shop.undaunted.life. Check out the link in the show notes, shop.undaunted.life. All right, we went a little longer on that first section, but let's go ahead and knock out these quick hitters. The feminist governor of Massachusetts signing a bill that will allow babies to be murdered in the womb all the way up to the baby's delivery date. This is according to Life News on August the 10th. Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey has signed H5595, which would legalize abortion up to birth. The radical bill that allows abortions up until birth, even on healthy unborn babies. Democrats fast-tracked the measure to bypass the full committee process so the full body could pass the bill before the legislature adjourned. The bill passed the overwhelmingly Democratic House on July the 22nd by a vote of 119 to 33. Under current state law, abortions are allowed up to 24 weeks of pregnancy, although weak exceptions essentially allow it up to birth. Abortions after that point are permitted only when the mother's life or health is threatened, which could mean anything, and if the baby is unlikely to survive outside the womb. The new bill shifts the criteria for late-term abortions from the list of specified medical conditions to a more flexible standard based solely on the abortionist approving the abortion. It would allow abortion to be carried out on babies at any gestational age after 24 weeks for any reason. So, couple things about this horrible woman, Maura Healey. She's a lesbian and she's in a marriage of some kind, even though that's not really a thing. Two lesbians can't get married. It's not right in the eyes of God. And also she claims to be Catholic. So go figure. Claims to be Catholic, married to a woman, also super big on baby sacrifice. It's like her favorite thing. But I actually want to show you a video. So Landon, go ahead and we're going to put this video up. But before we do, this is a video of her signing this bill, which will allow women to murder and pay assassins to help them murder their baby all the way up until the moment of natural live birth. Let's see what you notice in this video. What'd you notice? Actually, Landon, I want you to play it again. Play this video again. It's real short. If you're not watching this on YouTube, go subscribe, watch it. But let's watch that video again. All women smiling from ear to ear, eagerly anticipating every stroke of the pen, of the signature, eagerly anticipating her finishing, putting the pen down, and then clapping with joy, gleeful exuberance. They could not have been more satisfied with the law that they forced through, really more than likely against the will of most of the people in Massachusetts if they knew what was actually going on in a post-24-week gestation abortion. They could not have been happier about it. Absolute witches satanic, demonic, evil witches. Every last one of them. So big takeaway on this one. This is specifically for Governor Healy. I pray that Governor Healy, and also those cackling witches, I pray that they all repent of their murderous sins and accept Christ. They're clearly deeply evil, and it's their only hope. And yes, the blood of Jesus covers the sins of murdering your unborn baby as well. Romans 8:1, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. If they become in Christ, then it wipes away those sins. However, if Governor Healy and those women do not repent of their sins, I personally hope that they all burn in the hottest part of hell. Next quick hitter here, a father of a school shooter getting convicted for murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. This is according to the Associated Press on July the 30th. A man who gave his son the gun he used to kill 2 students and 2 teachers at Apffel High School in Georgia was sentenced Thursday to 15 years in prison. Colin Gray's sentencing comes days after his son, Colt Gray, was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in the September 4th, 2024 shooting at a school 45 miles northeast of Atlanta. Colt Gray, 16, had pled guilty to murder and other charges. Judge Nicholas Prim, who also sentenced Colt Gray, was blunt in addressing the elder Gray. It is clear you failed as a parent. But he said punishing crimes of negligence is particularly difficult because there were no intent to commit a crime. This is the judge again. My heart aches for everyone that was there that day, for all that had been impacted by it. But the law requires that I set aside emotion. I don't get to sentence with passion. I have the nearly impossible task of sentencing you without passion despite the immeasurable heartache that you caused, the father caused, Prim said. Gray, 55, is one of a handful of American parents who have been criminally charged after their children were accused in shootings. So, going to the story, obviously that last part does tell you it is a very small number of parents that have been charged with some sort of criminal murderous negligence when their children have committed crimes. I have some questions. What if the parents were not negligent, but their child was just evil and doing evil stuff? Go back to those cackling witches in the previous story. Don't you think some of them grew up in loving families with a mother and a father that taught them right from wrong, that were maybe even Christians and thought, yeah, you probably shouldn't kill babies in the womb because it's terrible, awful, and evil. But it didn't matter. They came to their own decisions and are doing their own evil acts. Another question is, since when is terrible parenting a crime exactly? There's no broad agreement in this country that terrible parents should be convicted of crimes. Also, at what point are the parents no longer responsible for the murderous actions of their child? 18? Some kids mature more quickly. There are kids that make murderous decisions at the age of 14 and 15, and they have all their faculties. They're deeply evil, but they have all their faculties. So the parents are responsible for that. But what about when they're 24? Are the parents still liable and responsible for something that the adult has done because we chose the arbitrary date of 18 years old in this country for what constitutes an adult? Also, why are white school shooters and their parents treated differently than black and Hispanic gang shooters? Oh, yep, I'm going there. Because the majority of the parents that have been convicted of crimes that their children committed have been white people, white parents. But when we look at the data, right? And yes, you can look at data however you want. You can say whatever you want. But if you go to the Department of Justice, the DOJ, when you go to the FBI, when you go to the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, here's the breakdown of juvenile murder arrests by race and ethnicity. This is ages 0 to 17. Black kids constitute 61% of the murders. They murder 61% of the people that are murders committed between 0 and 17 years of age. Now, white people, and this is the crap that you get into with statistics, you have to include non-Hispanic use. There are a lot of Hispanic kids, Hispanics in general, that are placed into the category of white. It's to cook the criminal books. So when you remove all that out, around 20% of the murders that take place with juveniles are committed by white use. For Hispanic people and Latinos, the best number we can get to is around 15%. And then you have Native American, Indians, that's less than 3%. And then Asians, Pacific Islanders is, less than 1%. So around 61% of the murders by use in this country are committed by black kids, but they only make up around 15% of the youth population. We're obviously not supposed to notice that or say that out loud, but it's just what the statistics, it's just what the data say. Now, if we look at per capita rates, like on a per capita basis, so this is per 100,000 youths aged 10 to 17 in the population, the juvenile arrest rate for murder among black youths is approximately 8 times higher than that of white youths, and 12 times higher than that of American Indian youths, and 14 times higher than that of Asian youths. Okay? So big takeaway on this one. Societally, if we're going to do this, then let's go ahead and do this. Let's do this across the board. Now, I can argue both sides in charging the parents for negligence and not charging the parents for negligence because they gave birth, and raised a sentient human being that gets to make their own decisions, but you are influenced by your environment and your experiences. So I can argue both sides. But societally, if we're going to give a man that did not pull the trigger on a gun and did not instruct his son to kill people at his school a 15-year murder sentence, which is essentially a death sentence for this man, then let's just do it across the board. So if you are the mother and father, even if you're not in the home, because, more than likely you are not in the home, and your little 14-year-old son goes out and gets in a gang shooting and kills somebody, you go to prison too. Who says no? Black, white, Asian, Indian, Hispanic, I don't care. You go to prison too. Again, if we're going to do this, let's do this. Because I don't think we want to get into that game, do we? That's why there's been so few of these situations, and it almost never gets any national coverage. It just kind of goes under the radar. Oh yeah, this white kid that was on SSRIs and had major mental health issues. Like, he took a family gun, or I don't care if his dad gave it to him. He thought he was responsible enough to have it. He obviously made the wrong decision. That kid takes a gun into a school, shoots people. The dad was at work, and then the dad gets a murder charge just like his son. Help me understand how this is a good idea. But again, the level of gang violence in all communities, but like even in the community I grew up in, a lot in Oklahoma, predominantly blacks and Hispanics, right? And some white people. Had a previous gang member that was a white guy on my show, right? When they commit crimes, drug dealing, running girls, running numbers, like theft, armed robbery, rape, murder, multiple murders, torture, why do we not charge the parents? It's because there's an unspoken societal agreement that that's not the parents' fault directly. They may have had a hand in it. They maybe could have done something better as a parent to prevent that, but ultimately they are only responsible for the things that they do. But when you look at a lot of the gang culture, and my buddy that was in a gang talked about this, a lot of his buddies that were in gangs, they were second and third generation gangbangers. So grandpa was clicked up. Mom and dad were clicked up. They got jumped into the same gang. So there's a direct line between those people in all those different gangs and their parents influencing them to continue in their life of crime. Because they may have aged out on, the standing on the sidewalk stuff and, some of the other like heavy stuff that's going on in these gangs now, but they've passed that torch on to their teenage kids. So again, if you want to play stupid games, let's win some stupid prizes. Speaking of stupid, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I'm allergic to calling her AOC because don't you have to be like cool or respectable to have a nickname? So it's like, but her name's really, really hard to say. So there you go. She posted a video explaining why she has decided to freeze her eggs, but then she also tells us to not be weird about it. So this is according to the New York Post on August the 9th. Squad Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has started the process of freezing her eggs and is using a vlog on Instagram to give her lefty fans mundane updates, such as her taking hormonal injections. So Ocasio-Cortez, Democrat of New York, age 36, revealed in a weekend post that she had been saving up for and contemplating the procedure for some time, hailing herself as a badass for taking on what tens of thousands of women have already gone through. She said she felt empowered to start that process now while Congress is on its August recess. AOC said despite knowing that the risk of being so open could backfire on her politically, she wanted to help inform other women about their options and normalize these discussions. So a lot of things here. We're not going to show the video. If you want to go look at some, adult woman injecting herself with hormones, knock yourself out, go find it on the internet. So a lot of things here. Everything that Ocasio-Cortez does is for attention and with a political purpose. Everything. She's very predictable in that way. She did this publicly in order to get conservatives to fall for her trap and comment on it. And it worked. It worked. And it works in both directions. And here I am talking about it. And it works in both directions. And this is what I mean. If conservatives ignore what she did, then the commentaries, how dare you not comment about how brave and awesome this woman is for delaying her natural biological ability to have children? How dare you? And if they do make a critical comment about it, then it's, how dare you comment about what a brave, strong woman does with her own body? Right? So they get you coming and going. And this is just typical, me first, I control my body, career-oriented or feminism, right? That's essentially what this is. She's not unique. She just has a big microphone. There's nothing super unique about this. And the funniest thing about this is if she were a true feminist, so if you really think about this, if she were a true feminist, she would just go get pregnant right now. Get pregnant out of wedlock. It's kind of a feminist thing to do as well. Not kill her baby, right? The ultimate feminist thing to do would be to sacrifice your baby on the altar of convenience, but have her not kill her baby and for her to just do her job and just put it out there in everyone's face and be like, why can't I do this job and be pregnant at the same time? I'm a woman. I'm a superhero. That would be like the super duper feminist thing to do. And the other thing about it is, while she does the weird thing and she announces it publicly to the world, she simultaneously demands that we don't say that it's weird. Right? Ben Shapiro's talked about this. It's he calls it like face tattoo syndrome. So you're at a coffee shop and the barista's got like a huge snake tattooed on their face or something like that. It's right in the middle of their face. And you stare at it and they catch you staring at it and they're like, what's your problem? Well, I'm distracted by the fact that you got a tattoo in the middle of your face, obviously. So if you don't notice it, it's like, oh, you're not noticing how artistic in their own personal expression. And if you do notice, it's like, stop being weird. Why are you being weird, bro? And also weird, she was apparently engaged for 5 years, but still isn't married. And then there's a little bit of confusion whether or not she's still with the guy that she was previously engaged to. But that's weird, but we're not supposed to notice that. And again, if she were pregnant right now, she's 36 years old. So her pregnancy would already be considered a geriatric pregnancy. And, by freezing her eggs, she is signaling that she likely would not even try to become a mother until she's in her 40s, at which point I don't know what comes after geriatric pregnancy, but the pregnancy would be incredibly dangerous for her and her baby. But all this kind of leads to my big takeaway. This is her saying without saying that she's running for president in 2028. I already talked about that earlier. So yes, a childless woman in her late 30s who worked as a bartender right before she won the race for the United States House of Representatives in essentially an all-blue district in New York, and a woman with the IQ roughly around room temperature is going to run for president. And guys, her odds of winning the Democratic nomination are good. They really are, and they're going to get better over time. And the odds of her beating either presumably J.D. Vance or my selection, which would be at this point Marco Rubio, those chances are also good. And guys, if she's to win, because I think she's just going to skip over Senate, right? I don't think she wants Chuck Schumer's job. I think she wants the White House. If she wins, then she would obviously be God's judgment on this country, for sure. Never had a female president. She would be the first. She's definitely not smarter than Hillary Clinton, but it'd be a running gun battle between her and Kamala Harris about who's dumber. But it would be this dumb feminist that would be in charge of all the levers of power of this government. And it's even worse, a dumb socialist communist president. Like the worst of most worlds colliding and coming together. Someone who thinks she has a four-headed Hydra on a leash without realizing that this Hydra has no leash and can't be controlled, right? By anyone or any group except God. And man, it'd be a terrible thing, but guys, don't be shocked if it happens. All right, next one here, a Hollywood star claiming that people who think pit bulls are dangerous are participating in dog racism. So John Bernthal, whom y'all remember as the actor who literally plays the same character in every movie he's ever been in, including the dreck that was The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. He was recently on the Howard Stern show, and he had this to say.
My dogs are the greatest, and they're
so
unbelievably
the myth of the pit bull is a lot of bullshit.
People got to stop that shit.
They got to stop.
People got to stop that shit.
Pit bulls don't attack.
No, man. Yeah. It's just racism. It's just dog racism. You know,
Right.
I think to be afraid of a breed of dog is completely ridiculous. It's like being afraid of somebody for their race or their sexual orientation. It's completely ridiculous. And I think if you see somebody, look, if a pit bull bites you, it's got to suck. You know what I mean? But they're no more likely to bite you than a Chihuahua or any other breed of dog. And
it probably has more to do with who owns them and how they were trained.
Yeah, I think that a lot of knuckleheads, unfortunately, are attracted to that breed of dog. And to me, you know, when I see some wannabe gangster getting pulled down the Venice Beach by his pit bull, and I'm like, you feed that fucker, and he's pulling you down the, you know, to me, that's not manly or strong at all. You know, I think you got to train your dog.
So much there. The myth of the pit bull. And of course, Howard Stern doesn't know enough about the subject matter. He's just as ignorant as everybody else. He just kind of, they both kind of go along on this myth of the pit bull. So if you've never heard about this myth, it's this myth that pit bulls are dangerous. That pit bulls, as they said a little bit later, they're no more likely to bite you than a Chihuahua or any other breed of dog. But what dumb people don't understand and don't recognize, because they have not been attacked or mauled to death by a pit bull, is that I don't care about per capita rates by dog breed when it comes to bites. I care about deaths. So yes, Chihuahuas bite a lot of people. Malteses bite a lot of people. I used to have 2 Malteses. They bit people, right? At worst, you're going to get a little bit of blood on your little thingy. There's never been a Chihuahua or a Maltese or one of those little cute little toy dogs that has mauled someone to death. But every single year, pit bulls, a single breed, mauls somewhere between 65 and 70%. They're responsible for 65 to 70% of all the deaths caused by dogs. It's been that way since I started taking the data. But that's a myth. Apparently, pit bulls just have a bad PR team, right? Because it's those dirty, rotten people in the news, you know, reporting the fact that, yeah, pit bull mauled a child to death. Because again, pit bulls aren't killing, 40-year-old strong, virile men. They're killing toddlers, infants, newborns, and elderly people. But it's just a myth, right? And then you have Stern's co-host, I don't know the gal's name. It probably has more to do with who owns them and how they were trained, right? Which that's the other argument. Oh, they just weren't trained right. No, actually, they're doing exactly what they were trained to do. Because if you knew anything about the history of the breed, they were trained to do something called bull baiting. So they were trained to attack a bull until the bull, basically gave up, and then, the dog would, finish killing the bull, or they would take the dogs away and then they would kill it themselves, the human beings that were paying to watch this happen. And one of the things that this dog was trained to do, and that it was specifically built to do, is its jaw, the mandible on that dog is so strong that when it clamps on, like say to the snout of a bull, it doesn't let go. Doesn't let go until it wants to, or until you shoot it. Doesn't let go. Now, if it can do that to a bull, imagine what it can do to an 18-month-old girl, or a little 3-year-old boy, or an 85-year-old woman that it pulls out of a wheelchair and onto the ground and grasps onto her neck and doesn't let go until she stops moving and making noise. But it probably has more to do with, who trains them, right? Like, let's just forget all the stories about how pit bulls that were family pit bulls, that they were purchased as a puppy or adopted as a puppy when the kids were already existing in the home and everybody was there and they loved on this dog and they fed it and they gave it water and they took it on walks and they dropped it off at doggy daycare and they never abused it. They never even got onto it. They were super understanding and all that. One day, dog just snaps, mauls the children to death. But it's the training, right? So big takeaway here. Send me your angry emails. I won't read them. Pit bulls are wild animals and should not be owned by private citizens. The breed needs to be eradicated. And so the only way that I will come towards the pit bull people is your pit bull that you have, that gets to be the last one. So I'm not saying we need to put like a anti-pit bull Gestapo together or SS that's going to go into all of our homes and euthanize all the pit bulls and all that. And of course, your precious little pit bull is the only one that won't maul someone to death because you understand what's going to happen in the future and you can see into the future and you know all things, right? Your pit bull gets to be the last one. No more breeding. If it's found that you have bred your pit bull and any of the other variations of that pit bull breed, you are going to get a prison sentence of some kind. Again, if we're just going to put everyone in prison for even stuff that they don't do, we're also going to extend that to our dogs. Why not? Okay? They should not be owned by private citizens. They're too dangerous to own, and the data are clear on that. All right, last one of the day. If you hung around all the way to the end, boy, are you going to get a treat. I tried to signpost it from the beginning. But one of my best buddies, right? The good old Nathan Apffel of the religion business, proving once again that he's not only a terrible journalist, but also an awful, awful person. So Nathan Apffel, really he's the gift that keeps on giving, to be honest. Like he's kind of like a butt pimple, right? Like you pop it, you think it's going to go away, and then it just kind of comes back, right? That's kind of who he is. He's so desperate to gain traction for his fledgling app and his company. And honestly, he's just kind of got this pick me energy, right, going on. And if you're not really familiar with that vernacular, like just imagine a gal who's maybe really, really attractive in her college years, but now she's, over 40 and, things don't look the way they used to and gravity is kind of taking hold. And now she's getting a lot of injections and, she's wearing and dressing in ways and that are more provocative and she's acting in a more sexually provocative manner and talking about how she's a MILF and a cougar and blah, blah, all just to get attention from men. She's just so desperate for attention. She doesn't want you to pay attention to the other people, pay attention to me. That's Nathan Apffel, okay? So he's clearly at this point obsessed with Pastor Joby Martin and the Church of 1122 down in Jacksonville. And then a few weeks ago, he decided to pull off a little publicity stunt. So what he did is he got on a boat with a camera crew and then he drives up to the dock at the retreat center for the Church of 1122, which is kind of the center point of his ire, even though he doesn't understand how IRS forms work and how it was, God and all those different things. But I already talked about that on a previous podcast. And he was demanding, with his camera crew there, demanding to get information about these two poor teenage boys or three poor teenagers that were trying to get out of a storm. They were trying to just moor up to the dock to get out of a storm because he had heard this rumor and he's like, perfect timing. So Nathan and his camera crew were told to leave, obviously, because they were intending to trespass in order to create content. That was the whole goal from the beginning. He didn't care about these teenage boys at all. Ultimately, they wanted to be kicked out. They wanted to be told to leave because, this kind of helps them with their whole conspiracy theory nonsense and churches are bad and all those types of things. And then he decided to post this video.
I am on the beautiful, what would you call this? Rivers of Woodbine, Georgia. I just cleated off at the retreat center and I politely wanted to confirm a story that I've heard about 3 kids in distress during a storm. Yeah. And 2 grandparents and 3 young children. And they said that they cleated off to wait out a storm, and the grandfather is a captain.
He's a captain.
10 years a captain. And instead of a church, a retreat center saying, hey, you guys are more than welcome to wait out what the captain claimed was an 8 to 9 out of 10 in regards to lightning and wind. So this family was fearful for their life, and all they wanted to do was cleat off and stay on their boat. The church, the boss man is what they called him, kicked him off into the storm. And so I wanted to give them the opportunity to either confirm or deny this story, and instead things just got wild,
guys.
So it's just so crazy to me that a Christian, his first response should be, oh my gosh, if you don't know about that incident, like, are the kids okay? And then let me talk to my staff to see what happened, because we need to be protecting children. Instead, the guy just threatened me over and over. He pushed my boat off the dock.
Threatened him.
He untied my boat, my rental, because I can't afford a boat. But he untied our boat and then claimed I needed to find Jesus. And then he said, I don't come to your house. And I said, well, this isn't your house. This is a retreat center. And he goes, it's my father's. Everything is my father's. So that is this worm's excuse. And I was livid. like this guy could care less about 3 children that almost died. And this is a week ago.
Well, they almost died.
So, unfortunately, this energy is par for the course. Ironically, that retreat center has a golf course on it. But
the horror.
You'd think that if and that was the head of security for 1122.
Not true.
You'd think if the head of security actually was a Christian and cared for children, he would be very fearful of for the children's lives, and then make sure his staff knew that, hey, our number one priority when people pull up in distress is to help people. But instead, he just pushed me off and said, we're not talking about this. So, man, look at how beautiful it is. I mean, to me, this is a billionaire's retreat. This is a Bezos, Kennedy, Musk retreat. But this is going to get very interesting.
There you have it from the world-renowned journalist, Nathan Apffel, which, by the way, if you're going to drive the boat, shouldn't you have your eyes on the water, right? I mean, gosh, if we're going to talk about safety, maybe don't sit there and do selfie video the whole time or something like that. So obviously we got this video, lots of big claims, oh my gosh, it was crazy. All this stuff was going down and oh man, these kids almost died, you guys. These kids almost died. Well, let's actually talk about the incident. So I called the boss of the retreat center myself, right? Got his number, called him, right? He's not the head of security, right? So I called the boss of the retreat center, the guy that runs the whole thing. Pretty sure he lives out there. And I asked what went down. All right, so he had seen the video and all that. I was like, so what happened? And so Nathan Apffel could have done the same thing that I did, if he was a real journalist. But, making a phone call to try to confirm a story, that's not nearly as dramatic as pulling up on a boat with cameras. So obviously he didn't do that. I mean, because that's what, anyway, this is what actually happened, right? So there was a storm going on, but it wasn't an 8 or 9 out of 10 storm, right? It was not a very severe storm at all, right? It was a rainstorm. So in fact, there was a relatively new employee of the retreat center that was working on the dock at the time of this crazy storm. So if it was a serious, lightning, life-threatening storm, this young man would not have been out there to even greet these people near the dock, okay? So this boat pulls up while this employee's out there, this young man, pulls up to the dock at the retreat center, and they say they want to moor up until the rain passes by, right? There were 2 adults on the boat, and there were, I think, 3 kids that looked to be teenagers, okay? So the new guy, the new employee that works there, when he's asked by these people, hey, can we moor up? He says, hey, I'm the new guy here. I don't know what I'm allowed to do or if I can approve anything. Hey, just let me call my boss real quick and see. Well, that answer, just saying, hey, let me call my supervisor, apparently infuriated these people on the boat. So the young man surmised during this process, because they were so furious, they started yelling at this kid, okay? Yelling at him, right? Cussing him, screaming at him, calling him names, and the supervisor could overhear this on the phone. And the young man surmised that the people on the boat were actually inebriated, at the very least the adults were inebriated, and they were immediately getting hostile. The supervisor heard all of this going on. And then, he heard that these people were being belligerent and abusive towards, his employee. And so the boss tells the employee, yeah, tell him to get out of here. They can't talk to you like that. This isn't a super dangerous storm. It's a rainstorm. They need to get out. So in terms of Nathan Apffel's narrative or whatever, he was just trying to confirm, right? Because he's such a talented and fervent journalist, that he was just trying to confirm that there was no there. Let me just confirm that this is what happened, what I heard happen. Well, so the only reason that the situation was dramatic at all was because the people that were in the boat were acting like a bunch of jerks. That's the only dramatic thing that can be reported here, and it's not even worthy of reporting. Drunk jerk on boat is not exactly breaking news, right? So we can assume in this story, again, I don't know for sure, but we can assume that if these people pulled up, acted politely, were told, hang on, let me check with my boss. They said, okay, hey, no problem, I understand. This young man's boss would have told them, yeah, moor up to the dock until the rain passes and then get on with your business, get on with your way, and tell the employee, yeah, also get back to work. But here we are again, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Those people found out that you can get a whole lot further in life if you don't act like a drunken jerk face. But then Nathan's like, man, it got crazy. When I came up to figure out what happened to these kids that almost died, it got crazy. Wow, Nathan, it got crazy, did it? That sounds crazy. So post the video, Nathan. You say the head of security, who you're so dumb and so bad at your job, you couldn't even figure out what this guy's title was. You said the head of security came out and things got crazy. And you had cameras rolling. We haven't seen a video. We haven't seen you post the interaction. Could it be that you're a lying piece of garbage? That things didn't actually get crazy? That you're just full of crap? It's probably more likely. Then he says at the end, it's going to get very interesting. It's going to get very interesting. Well, I'm recording this on Monday, comes out Thursday, so something could happen in the next 2.5 days or so. But it's really weird. As interesting as he thought things were going to get, apparently they haven't gotten interesting at all because he didn't make any follow-up videos. So it's so interesting that we're not going to talk anymore about it, I guess. And here's the other thing. Do you know what was going on at the retreat center when Apffel pulled up and did his little publicity stunt with all the cameras? You know what was going on at the retreat center at that time? The Church of 1122 was hosting a retreat, a free retreat for the fathers and mothers who have lost their children. Yep. Nathan Apffel pulls up and disrupts a retreat for fathers and mothers whose children had died. It's almost too on the nose. So some big takeaways here. Just to remind you, Nathan Apffel is not a journalist. He owns cameras. He has an internet connection. He has an Instagram account, but he's not a journalist. He's a publicity whore. That's it. He's trying to get a larger profile so that he can get more people to download his app so that he can eventually package it and sell it, even though he's not really a big fan of capitalism. Go figure. He's not a good faith actor. He's a conscious, nefarious actor. I talk about useful idiots and conscious, nefarious actors. He's clearly a conscious, nefarious actor. I did a whole long episode about it a few months back when he first started this whole kerfuffle with the Church of 1122 and began to express his overwhelming obsession with the Church of 1122 and their lead pastor, Joby Martin. But he's not a good faith actor. Because I've been asked by people like, hey, why don't you just reach out to him and have him on the show and do a debate? And as I've said before, because it would be more worth my time to try to nail Jell-O to the wall or grab a fistful of water. I watched him debate with my buddy Ruslan, if you can call that a debate. He just went in there and just kind of like slimed his way around and would refuse to give his actual opinions on things. And when he was, basically taken to the book, taken to scripture to be like, can you please prove why you're able to do these types of things? He couldn't do it. And I know some more things behind the scenes that happened there, but it's not my story to share. That's Ruslan. It's up to Ruslan and his team. But I'm not going to debate someone that's not a good faith actor. If someone fervently disagrees with me, that's fine. Like, I'm fine if you want to disagree with me, but you're not going to argue or debate me in good faith. And the last thing here on this story, he really seems to hate the bride of Christ. He hates the church, which makes me question if he's even a Christian. I know people get real, tummy hurt about, questioning whether or not people that purport to be Christians are actually Christians, but I'll echo what my lead pastor said on this show months ago. There are people that are lead pastors of churches that aren't Christians. So would it be insane that some guy that claims to be a Christian that is not submitted to a local body of believers, is not a member of a church, not submitted to the leadership and discipline of a local shepherd or body of elders or deacons, is it crazy that I would question that he's even a Christian? Because I'm not the first person to point this out. I think I heard Vody Baucham do it. But it's like, if you went up to somebody and said, hey man, I love you. You're the best. I want to be your disciple. I want to do everything that you do. Like, help me be more like you. Also, by the way, I don't like your wife very much. She's kind of ugly. She does a bunch of stuff that I don't really like. Actually, here's a list of things that will make your wife better and make me like her more. And if your wife doesn't do those things, I'm going to talk about it publicly. I'm going to shame her. I'm going to point a light to it, right? Do you actually love that person that you said you initially loved? When you hate his wife that much? Is it possible to love that person and be a disciple of that person if he has such horrible judgment that he would be in a sacrificial relationship with his bride? Because that's what Nathan Apffel is doing with the bride of Christ. Because like I told you, sure, go after Jesse Duplantis, right? Go after Paula White and Joyce Meyer. Go after, any of these megachurch pastors. Go after Benny Hinn. Go after these people that are just lining their pockets and stealing from people and performing, spiritual abuse on people and are very likely maybe even themselves not even Christians, right? Go after those people. Expose them for the charlatans they are. Expose them for all the spiritual abuse. But then when you go after pastors that are just trying to be about the gospel and trying to teach people what the Bible says and to encourage them to do what it says, then what exactly are you doing? You post pictures of you, fishing in a river by yourself and your caption says church. You're just like all those people that are like, man, I don't need to go to church. I'm just going to go out in nature. I'm going to go sit me in my deer stand, right? That's where I find God. That nonsense. Because being a part of a local body of believers is not a polite suggestion. It's a requirement. There are implicit and explicit verses in scripture that say we have to be a part of the body of believers. We have to be connected to the body. But not Nathan Apffel. Not the people that he works with, not the people that follow his content. He's exempt somehow. But again, this is not someone that we should take seriously, but he is the butt pimple, the gift that keeps on giving. So we're probably going to have to continue talking about him. All right, guys, that'll do it for today. But before we go, we are going to do a quick resilience boost. At Undaunted.Life, our mission is equipping men to push back darkness with content that forges spiritual, mental, and physical resilience. Nathan Apffel is going to hate this. We have a couple ways you can donate to us. So if you want to donate specifically to Undaunted.Life, Undaunted.Life/donate. And if you need a tax-deductible donation, you can support the work that I do with the Daily Blade. You can go to newhorizonsfoundation.com. And then you can check us out there. You can just go in the search bar, or you can look at everything we've got here in the show notes. Also, I've got links to where you can go to our shop and links to everything that I talked about on today's episode. Check everything out in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode. Wherever you're listening to this, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a positive 5-star review. If you want me to come speak live at your event or on your podcast, just shoot me an email to info@Undaunted.Life. Follow us on Instagram and like us on Facebook, and check out our website for everything else, including how to donate to keep more content like this coming, www.Undaunted.Life. The music on this podcast is the song Conqueror by the Christian metal band Void Awaken. Be sure to stream their music on Spotify, Apple Music, and wherever else you get your music. I'm your host, Kyle Thompson. Remember, keep pushing back darkness, keep forging spiritual, mental, and physical resilience, keep seeking the Lion of Judah.